Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. In the 5th ayah of Surah Tawbah, it is stated, then, when the sacred months have passed, slay the infidels wheresoever you find them. Capture them, besiege them, and lie in wait for them at every of the ambush. But if they repent and perform the prayers and pay the zakat, then let them go their way. Truly, Allah is forgiving and merciful. This is the sword verse. You see, there are 3 components in this verse. The first, an injunction that when the sacred months have passed, that is the first condition. It is establishing a preamble. And then, go and kill the infidels wherever you find them. And even stay in ambushes. That means have your intelligence very strong. Find the infidels, kill them. And the third part of the ayah is, if they repent, perform the prayers, and pay the zakat, then let them go. It is not an understatement to say that Quran is one of the most widely read books. And at the same time, probably is the most misquoted and the most misused book. Misquoted by the non-Muslims and misused by the so-called Muslims. The goal of our lecture today is to discuss how we Muslims respond to these allegations against our book, the Quran, against our religion, the Islam, and against our Prophet, Muhammad Mustafa sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now, there are 2 adversaries. First, the non-Muslims, who are the polemical critiques. That means they want to get disrepute to the religion. They want to get disrepute to the book. They want to get disrepute to the Prophet. They want to get disrepute to the Muslims, and they want to brand the Muslims as, and want to brand the religion, Islam, as promoting terrorism. On the other hand, there are scholars like John Esposito. There are scholars like Karen Armstrong. There are scholars like Leslie Hazelton, Oliver Lehman, who, whenever offered their opinions about Islam or the Quran, do the background research properly. If they are offering an opinion or a comment about an ayah, they look at the asbab al-nuzul of the ayah, under what circumstances the ayah was revealed. What was the time of the revelation? What was the history at that time? What was the biography of the Prophet at that time? And then they pass on an opinion. On the other hand, the literalist Muslims, in the modern period, Muslims, I feel, are entangled between this literalism and the ritualistic orthodoxy on one hand, and the modernization, the advancement of the Western world on the other hand. They are not able to compete with the Western world. So they come up with this literalism and what conditions are being created in today's world. Literalism goes back to the time of our Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam, when during the Battle of Siffin, the Kharjis were with Imam Ali, and during the Battle of Siffin, when Imam Ali's army's commander-in-chief, Malik ibn Ashtar, was reportedly few hours away from crushing and killing Muawiyah, Muawiyah played a trick. He asked his soldiers to raise the Quran on the spears. And at that particular time, Imam Ali was surrounded by the Kharjis. And the Kharjis asked Imam to stop the war. The Imam said, that is not Quran. That is only paper and ink, because Quran is in the hearts and minds of the Muslims. But the Kharjis revolted, they threatened to kill Imam Ali. Imam Ali had to send a message to Malik ibn Ashraf to stop the war. And after the war was stopped, there was an arbitration between Imam Ali and Muawiyah. The Kharjis did not even agree to the arbitration, and they said the judgment is only Allah's. Imam Ali explained to them that yes, the wisdom belongs to Allah, but it has to be carried on by the human agency. And that is why in the 30th verse of Surah Al-Baqarah, Allah had announced to the angels that He is creating mankind on this earth as His Khalifa. Now, a just ruler uses Allah's wisdom to promote social justice, to protect the weak from oppression, to promote peace, to promote economy. That is a just ruler. But an evil ruler will only use to protect his evil deeds, to say, oh, it is Allah's act, and that's why it happened. Literalism further came in the 9th century when Daud ibn Khalaf established his Zahiri school of thought. And that was literal interpretation of the Quran. And then in the 12th and 13th century, Ibn Taymiyyah established the Salafi movement. And in the modern world, in the 18th century, Abdul Wahab established Wahhabism. Coming back to the sword verse, Dr. Nasser attributes the Asbab-e-Nuzul of the sword verse to the breach of the Treaty of Hudaibiyyah. I have reviewed the tafsir by Maulana Muhammad Ali, who was a Qadiani, and then Ibn Khatir, and who was a disciple of Ibn Taymiyyah, and also Maulana Maududi. Maulana Maududi was a follower of Imam Khomeini, and when he died in New York, Agha Khomeini had offered to offer his namaz-e-janazah. He had said that if while his body was being transferred to Pakistan, he said if they can stop in Tehran, he would offer the namaz-e-janazah for him. Now, I'm sorry, Brother Saeed, Mizan, this verse has not been translated in English. And Ibn Khatir, who was a disciple of Ibn Taymiyyah, who was a Salafi, he does not give any reason for the revelation of the sword verse. But he states that Hazrat Umar had used this verse to fight those people who were not paying the zakat. Now, let's go back to the sword verse. The third part of the sword verse, where if the infidels repent, if they offer prayers and they offer the zakat, then let them go their way. Now, this is for those infidels who had continuously breached treaties and went back on their words. So in order to assess their seriousness, their truthfulness, it was ordered that they repent and offer salah and offer the zakat and give the zakat. It was not given carte blanche. It was related to the breach of the treaty. So I don't know how Hazrat Umar used it to fight people to collect zakat. Then the preceding verse of the sword verse, the 4th ayah of Surah Tawbah, it orders the Prophet that if someone is honoring the treaty, then you honor the treaty, because Allah loves the righteous. So it is not for those people, the sword verse was not for those people who did not breach the treaty. And the succeeding verse of the sword verse, that's the 6th verse of Surah Tawbah, it states that even during the war, if someone comes to you, show him the religion of Allah. And if they follow it, right. If they do not follow, then take them to a place of safety. The Prophet was not ordered to kill infidels wherever he found them. This ayat is only related to war. This ayat is only related to breach of treaties. It is just not a carte blanche ayat that anyone can go and kill anyone they want to. It does not give rights to Muslims to go and kill infidels when they want. It does not give rights to Muslims to go and bomb buildings. It does not give rights to Muslims to blast airplanes, to blast trains. It does not give rights to Muslims to go and kill the innocent Christians and the Jews, because Quran always addresses them as the people of the book. It has continuously addressed the Christians and the Jews as the people of the book. And these so-called Muslims, they forget that this 32nd ayah of Surah Al-Ma'idah, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala states that you kill one innocent as though you have killed the entire humanity. And there are these so-called Muslims. They say they are going to fight till everybody converts into Muslim, and they forget the 256th ayah of Surah Al-Baqarah, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala announces that there is no coercion in religion. These ayats were only revealed, under circumstances of wars. They were only revealed when there was a breach of treaties. And remember the first injunction, that when the holy months have passed, it clearly shows that there is certain circumstances when the holy months have passed. That is the preamble of the ayah. So the ayah cannot be used under any circumstances. There are circumstances out there. And Dr. Nasser identifies those holy months as Rajab, Shawwal, Zihar, and Zilj. And what happens during wars, like when we were attacked on September 11, President Bush had warned Taliban, give us Osama bin Laden and we'll let you go. And I have personally heard it thrice on the television, that give us Osama. And then, when it was not, he went and attacked. Now, let's go to the base. Let's go to the base of the ayah. It was Treaty of Hudaibiyyah, and it was a very, very important aspect of the Prophet's life. Prophet had a dream that he was performing. It happened in the 6th Hijri, that he was performing an Umrah. He announced to his companions, asked them to get ready. They went between Medina and Makkah. They had to stop at Hudaibiyyah. The Prophet sent 2 emissaries to Makkah to inform them that they are coming on a peaceful trip to perform a pilgrimage, and one of them was Hazrat Usman. But the Makkans did not agree. And after that, the Makkans sent Suhail ibn Umar, who was a very tough negotiator. Suhail ibn Umar was a tough negotiator. And he came with 6 points. He said, 1, you're not going to perform the Umrah today. You will go back to Medina. 2, you can come back next year unarmed to perform Umrah. 3, we will not have a war between ourselves and our allies. Our allies are also protected for 10 years. 4, if a Muslim from Makkah escapes and comes to Medina, the Muslims of Medina had to return the Muslim of Makkah back to Makkah. And number 5, on the other hand, if a Muslim from Medina goes to Mecca, then he'll be captured and chained. And number 6, the Muslims living in Mecca who were in Takhayyur were allowed to practice their religion freely. So, and the treaty was drafted by Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib. And the treaty always started with Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. This is a treaty between the Prophet of Islam and Suhail ibn Umar. Suhail ibn Umar said, we do not recognize an Allah who is Rahman and Rahim. So to strike that out. And we do not recognize you as a prophet. So strike it out, right there, Muhammad ibn Abdullah. Imam Ali refused to do that. So the Prophet struck it off. And it is reported that there were 14 to 1500 Muslims with the Prophet, and they were all upset. They could not understand the veracity of the treaty. In Surah Tawbah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala announced the Treaty of Hudaibiyyah as a manifest and a very clear victory. It was not done during the Battle of Badr, when 300 Muslims defeated 1,000 kuffars. It was not done during Battle of Uhud, when 700 Muslims drove away 10,000 kuffars. It was not done during the Battle of Khandaq, when Muslims had very meticulously planned to defend Medina, and later on it was not done during the Battle of Khaybar also. But Allah announced the Treaty of Hudaibiyyah as a manifest victory for the Muslims. And let's see what advantages did the Prophet have. One, because of the temporary peace that was established with the kuffars of Makkah, the Prophet could go and go to Khaybar, and the Jews were defeated. Otherwise, the infidels of Makkah would have supported the Jews, and the Prophet would have had a tough time. Then the Prophet could tackle the small tribal groups. Prophet tackled tribal groups, and Prophet got time to consolidate Islam when there were only 1,500 people at Hudaibiyyah, and in these 2 years Islam grew a lot. And then what happened was, after 2 years, the kuffars of Makkah helped their allies, Banu Bakr, to go and kill the allies of the Muslims, of the tribe of Huzailah. When the Prophet came to know about that innocent people of the allies of the Muslims were killed, the Prophet was very upset, and he said, if I do not help the people of Huzailah with whom I have a treaty, then Allah will not help me. And that's when this movement started against the infidels. And these are one of the reasons for the revelation of the sword verse. So having talked about the sword verse, having talked about the Treaty of Hudaibiyyah, my response to the non-Muslims, and especially the critiques of Islam, Jews and the Christians, I tell them that Prophet David or Saul, who is called Talut in the Quran, he was not a prophet, but he was a divinely appointed king by Prophet Samuel. And Joshua as some of the earlier commentators of the Quran have told that he is a prophet. And our Prophet Muhammad Mustafa sallallahu alaihi wasallam were all warriors. They were all warriors. So when you have warriors, so when you have verses about them, they would be violent. And when I searched the Old Testament in the book of Samuel, chapter 15, verses 1 to 9, in the book of Joshua, chapter 6, verses 20-21, in the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 2, verses 32, 35, and chapter 3, 3 to 7. The verses are so violent. Quran gives an immunity to the women, gives an immunity to the old people, gives an immunity to the children, gives an immunity to the non-combatants. And these verses in the Bible, they say, go, kill the men and women, kill the aged and the young, kill the infants and the babies, kill the camel, kill the horses, kill the mules, kill the donkeys. But I cannot take those verses and call Christianity or Judaism violent religions, because they're backgrounds. If I'm just reading those verses, I cannot form an opinion about it. I have to go and research. I have to look at the background and look at the history, and only then I will be able to give some opinion about these verses, and till that I cannot. And my response to the literalist so-called Muslims, the Salafis. The Salafism, Ibn Taymiyyah was the person who propagated the Salafism. Ibn Taymiyyah was that person who said going to the grave of the Prophet is a bid'ah, innovation. Like when we go to Jannatul Baqi, there's people are bid'ah everywhere, you know. So all this bid'ah kind of a thing started from these literalists. And going to the grave of the Prophet is a bid'ah, and he was jailed for that. And who are the Salafs? The Salafs are 3 generations. First, the Sahabis of the Prophet, the Tabi'un, that their successors, and Tabi'un, their successors. So 3 successors. And what kind of Salafs they are? Khulafai Rashidin, 4 of them. The second, the third and fourth were assassinated by the Salafs, by the companions. After that, the Prophet's grandson, his whole family was massacred in Karbala. These were the Salafs. And Abdul Wahab, who comes from Najd. Najd is no Homs. Najd is no Shiraz. Najd is no Najaf. Najd is no Cairo, Al-Azhar University. Najd is no Medina. Najd was not a center of learning. He comes up with this philosophy, and the man was ostracized by his own father and his own brother. And he goes to Ibn Saud, and because of their political alignment, they go to Karbala, demolish the tomb of Imam Hussein, and kill 5,000 Shias out there in Karbala at his time. Then later on, Bin Laden, Baghdadi, all these mindsets, tens of thousands of innocent people. These people, even Muslims who do not align with them, in Pakistan, at least there are recorded 90 to 100 bomb attacks during processions and in the Shia mosques. All these Salafis. Recently, there is a scholar in India. If you can go to YouTube and watch him, his name is Zakir Naik. He's a Salafi, Zakir Naik. And in his, when he gives his sermon, now he's kicked out of India, he's in Malaysia. And even in Malaysia, Prime Minister Mahathir had strictly warned him because he started against the Hindus of Malaysia. And in one of the videos, I have heard Hazrat Yazid Raziyallah Ta'ala Anhu. Hazrat Yazid Raziyallah Ta'ala Anhu, may Allah be pleased with the assassinator, with the murderer of Imam Hussein, the beloved prophet of, beloved grandson of the Prophet. Now, if he says Yazid Raziyallah Ta'ala Anhu, so what happens is not very surprising, because that's what the mentality is. Finally, as Muslims, brothers, it is our task to read our book, to understand our book, and to think, like we have discussed about that, think, reflect about our books so that it benefits us, it benefits our children, it benefits our near and dear ones, it benefits our fellow Muslims, it benefits our neighbors, it benefits the humanity. And especially our youth. But I was in Hyderabad in January, and before I gave a lecture in my family reunion, one of my younger cousins came and asked me, listen, Mehdi bhai, it is a violent religion. Look at this. voice. Look at this word. So during that lecture, I have to address that, because that's the thinking. What is happening in this world because of these so-called Muslims, and how the media is using it against us. So we have to get up, we have to express ourselves. We have to show that our religion is not a violent religion. And we have to contribute to this society to gain our respect back. Thank you very much. Salam.